John Carter sat at his sleek modern desk in his Houston office, surrounded by blueprints and schematics that filled his world with structure and precision. The soft hum of the air conditioning was a familiar backdrop, offering comfort in his meticulously ordered life. He was engrossed in a project, pencil poised over paper, when a glimmer of white caught his eye among the pile of bills and advertisements. It was an envelope, aged and creased, the handwriting unmistakably belonging to his brother, Sam. With a sigh, John reluctantly set down his pencil and reached for the letter, his heart pounding unexpectedly. As he tore it open, the scent of old paper wafted up, mingling with memories he had long buried. He unfolded the letter, and his eyes scanned over the elegant yet shaky handwriting that spoke of urgency and vulnerability. "John," it began, "I need your help. Dad is sick. The ranch is falling apart." Paralyzed by the weight of the words, John felt a chill sweep through him. He remembered the years of silence, the bitter arguments, and the resentment that had built a wall between them. "Why now?" he muttered under his breath, reading the letter again. "Why after all this time?" His mind drifted back to moments of laughter and joy, now overshadowed by the harsh realities of their fractured family. The vivid recollection of Sam's angry face during their last fight surged to the forefront. "You think you're better than us? Just because you have a fancy job?" Sam's voice echoed in his mind. John shook his head, trying to dispel the memories, but they clung to him like shadows. After several minutes of wrestling with his thoughts, he finally placed the letter down, allowing the weight of his decision to settle on his shoulders. "I should go," he whispered to himself, but doubt gnawed at him. He glanced around his office, the walls adorned with accolades and achievements, reminders of his life's work. Could he really abandon this for a past he tried so hard to escape? The guilt was a heavy shroud, wrapping around his heart tightly. That night, sleep evaded him. John tossed and turned, haunted by memories of family dinners filled with tension and unspoken words. He recalled their father, Henry, with a stern gaze, always pushing them to excel, to be perfect. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of gold and orange, he felt the weight of his decision growing heavier. With a heavy heart, he rose from bed and began to pack. He meticulously folded his clothes, each movement deliberate, yet his mind raced with anxiety. "What will I even say to them?" he questioned aloud, his voice echoing in the stillness of his empty apartment. "Will they even want to see me?" The drive to Austin was agonizing. Each mile felt like an eternity, and the landscape changed from the urban sprawl of Houston to the rural expanse of Texas, reminding him of his childhood. Memories flooded back like a torrent, the laughter of summer days, the arguments, and the inevitable silence that followed. As he approached the familiar dirt road leading to the ranch, he felt his heart race. He pulled over, his car dust swirling around him as the wind picked up. The old farmhouse loomed ahead, but it was a shell of its former self. "This is it," he murmured, staring at the road that had once felt like home. A storm brewed in the distance, dark clouds swirling ominously, mirroring the turmoil within him. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the steering wheel tighter and pressed forward, each bump in the road echoing the unease that filled his chest. As he drove closer, the memories of his past enveloped him. The arguments with Sam, their father's disappointed frown, and the desperate longing for acceptance. He parked, hesitated, and finally stepped out into the familiar yet haunting landscape. The air was thick with the scent of rain. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper as he walked toward the house, bracing himself for the reunion that could either heal or further fracture their family. John stepped out of his car, the familiar dust of the old dirt road swirling around his feet as he approached the ranch he had left behind so many years ago. The sight was a punch to the gut. The once vibrant property now lay in disarray. Fences sagged, paint peeled from the barn, and the gardens were overrun with weeds. He took a deep breath, his heart racing with the weight of memories that surged forward like an unwelcome tide. As he walked towards the house, he spotted Sam emerging from the porch, his face a mask of tension and weariness. The brothers locked eyes for the first time in years, a moment suspended in time. In that silence, the unspoken words and unresolved grievances hung heavily between them. John's throat tightened as he struggled to maintain his composure. "John," Sam finally said, his voice low and rough, a hint of resentment curling around each syllable. Sam. John's reply was barely above a whisper, his gaze drifting to the ground. Unsure of how to bridge the chasm that had grown between them, Sam stepped forward, crossing his arms defensively. You came. Guess that means the letter got to you. Yeah, it got to me, John replied, trying to keep his voice steady. But I didn't expect this mess. He gestured to the state of the ranch, the disappointment clear in his tone. Nice to see you too, Sam shot back, frustration lacing his words. You think I wanted it to end up like this? You left us, John. You chose your life over your family. John felt a flare of anger. And what was I supposed to do? Stay here and watch everything fall apart? I had to make a life for myself. By running away? That's rich, Sam retorted, his voice rising. You think it's easy to keep this place running alone? You think I wanted to be the only one left to pick up the pieces? Enough. A frail voice interrupted, and both brothers turned to see Henry, their father, standing in the doorway. He looked older, his face etched with lines of worry and age. The strength that once defined him now diminished. This isn't the time for fighting. John's heart sank as he took in the sight of his father, the man who had always seemed invincible now appearing so fragile. Dad, he said softly, stepping closer, desperate to connect. John, Henry replied, his voice trembling slightly. I'm glad you're here. I need you both. Henry's gaze shifted between his sons, a silent plea for unity hanging in the air. Sam's posture softened, the fight draining from him as he looked at their father. We're here, Dad. We just don't know how to fix this. Henry sighed, the weight of his years pressing down on him. I don't have all the answers, but we need to come together. This ranch, it's our family legacy. I can't do this alone. John felt a swell of guilt wash over him. He had distanced himself, convinced that he was doing what was best for his own life, but now he saw the toll it had taken on everyone. I didn't realize how bad it was, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. None of us did, Sam responded, his tone softer now. But we can't let it go like this. We can't let it die. The brothers exchanged a glance, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Perhaps it wasn't too late to mend what had been broken, but the silence stretched on, heavy with the weight of their past. Henry cleared his throat, attempting to bridge the gap. Let's sit down. I want to talk about what we can do together. As they moved into the house, John felt a mix of apprehension and hope. The air inside was thick with memories that felt both comforting and suffocating. He sat at the old wooden table, the surface scratched and worn, a testament to the years gone by. Do you remember when we used to sit here and plan our next big project? Henry asked, a faint smile flickering across his face. You two were always full of ideas. Yeah, like that treehouse, Sam chuckled, a hint of nostalgia softening his features. We thought we could build a mansion up there, John smiled, the memory a balm to his frayed nerves. And we destroyed half the yard trying to gather materials. Exactly, Henry said, his eyes lighting up. We made a mess, but we did it together. The three of them shared a moment of silence, the memories swirling around them like ghostly echoes. John's heart ached at the realization of what had been lost, but he also felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. They had a chance to rebuild, not just the ranch, but their relationship as a family. Let's figure this out, John said, a new resolve settling over him. We can't change the past, but we can start fresh from here. Sam nodded, and for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Yeah, I'm in. Let's do this for Dad. And for us. Henry watched his sons, a small smile breaking through the worry etched on his face. In that moment, amidst the remnants of their fractured family, the seeds of reconciliation began to take root. As sun began to set over the dilapidated ranch, casting long shadows across the table where the three men sat, the air was thick with an unspoken tension. Henry, with his frail hands, began to share stories from his past, hoping to bridge the chasm that had grown between him and his sons. Do you remember that summer when we built the treehouse? Henry's voice trembled slightly, as if the memories were a fragile thread holding them together. You two were so determined to have the best treehouse in the neighborhood. John looked up, his fork pausing midair. I remember it well. We fought over who got to choose the design. You made us work so hard for it, It wasn't just a treehouse, it was like a fortress. Sam snorted, a hint of a smile breaking through his earlier stoicism. Yeah, and it fell apart after a week. We were so proud of it, though. Henry chuckled softly, the sound like brittle leaves crunching underfoot. You wanted it to be perfect, just like I did. But I pushed you both too hard. I see that now. His gaze shifted from John to Sam, a mixture of regret and longing in his eyes. I always wanted you to succeed, but I didn't know how to show it. Silence enveloped the table as the weight of his words hung in the air. John's heart raced, the memories flooded back, intertwined with the pain of their fractured relationship. You thought pushing us would make us strong, but it only made us feel like we could never measure up. I was always trying to prove myself to you, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Sam shifted in his seat, the tension crackling like static. We were kids, Dad. We just wanted you to be proud of us, but you never seemed satisfied. It was like nothing we did was enough. Henry's face crumpled with emotion. I was scared. I thought if I didn't push you, you would lose your way. I didn't want you to be like me, afraid to take risks, to fail. He paused, the shadows in his eyes deepening. I didn't know how to be a father. I only knew how to work hard, to provide. The room was enveloped in silence once more, save for the distant sound of a rustling wind. John's chest tightened as he absorbed his father's admission. You don't have to be like that anymore. We're not kids anymore, Dad. We've grown up, and so have you. Have I? Henry's voice cracked, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath his gruff exterior. I've been so focused on what I thought you needed that I lost sight of what you really wanted. I see that now, and I'm sorry. John glanced at Sam, who was staring at his plate, his emotions swirling beneath the surface. It's hard to just forget the past, John said slowly. Those years of silence, they left scars. I don't know if I can just let that go. Sam looked up, his eyes glistening. Neither do I, but I want to try. I don't want our father's mistakes to define us. We can't change what's happened, but we can change how we move forward. Henry nodded, the weight of their shared pain settling among them like an unwelcome guest. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I may not have been the father you needed, but I'm willing to learn. John felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. You've got to understand, Dad, it's not just about fixing things around the ranch. It's about us too. We need to talk, to really talk. Then let's start now, Henry said, his voice steadier. Let's share our truths, our fears. We can't move forward without facing the past. The three men sat in a circle of vulnerability, the shadows of their past swirling around them. They had been locked in silence for too long, but now, the promise of understanding began to seep through the cracks. As they shared their stories, the atmosphere shifted, and the remnants of resentment started to ebb away, leaving only the fragile beginnings of healing. The wind howled through the aging structures of the ranch, a foreboding sign of the storm that was quickly approaching. John and Sam stood on the porch, their eyes scanning the darkening horizon. The sky was a swirling mass of gray, and the air crackled with tension, as if nature itself was mirroring the unresolved conflicts between the two brothers. We need to do something, Sam said, his voice strained with urgency. If we don't secure the barn and the fences, we could lose everything. I can't do this alone. John hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. The thought of working alongside Sam, after all the years of resentment, felt like an insurmountable challenge. He glanced at his brother, whose face was etched with worry. You think I'm just going to stand by and watch everything fall apart? John shot back, his tone sharper than he intended. You're the one who wanted to keep this place running. Maybe if you had asked for help sooner. Maybe if you hadn't run away. Sam's voice rose, cutting through the wind. The bitterness in his words hung heavy in the air. You left us to deal with all of this on our own. Now you want to come back and play the hero? The accusation stung, but John felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. I didn't come back to argue, Sam. I came back because I care. But if you want my help, we need to put our differences aside. This isn't about us anymore. It's about Dad and the ranch. Sam's expression softened for a moment, the weight of their shared history pressing heavily on both of them. Fine, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. Let's get to work. As they hurried to the barn, The wind picked up, swirling dust around their feet and sending chills down their spines. Together, they moved with a sense of urgency, each step echoing the unspoken tension between them. John grabbed a loose plank and began securing it to the barn door. Sam joined him, working on the hinges, their movements synchronized by necessity rather than camaraderie. "Why did you ever come back, John?" Sam asked, breaking the silence as he tightened a screw. "Not even for Dad's birthday or holidays. It was like you just disappeared." John paused, his hands stilling for a moment. "I thought it was for the best," he replied, his voice low. "I thought you all would be better off without me around. I didn't want to be a reminder of whatever it was that drove us apart." "Better off?" Sam scoffed. "You think we didn't miss you? Every time I looked at that empty chair at the dinner table, it was like a punch in the gut. You could have at least tried to reach out." "I didn't know how to reach out," John admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "I was angry. Angry at you, at Dad, at everything. I thought distance would heal things, but it didn't. It just made it worse." The wind howled again, a mournful sound that seemed to mock their attempts at reconciliation. They worked in silence for a while, each lost in thought as the storm loomed closer. Suddenly a loud crack echoed through the air, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated the darkened sky. The brothers exchanged a glance, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. "Let's finish this," Sam said, resolutely pushing aside his own emotions. "We can't let this place go down without a fight." As they continued their work, the winds picked up, rattling the barn and sending shivers down their spines. The urgency of the approaching storm forced them to collaborate more closely. They moved around each other, their bodies brushing against one another in the cramped space, and for the first time in years, a flicker of familiarity began to emerge amid the chaos. "John," Sam shouted over the roar of the wind, his voice hoarse. "Grab that tarp. We need to cover the hay before it gets soaked." Without thinking, John lunged for the heavy canvas, his muscles straining as he wrestled with it in the gusty winds. "I've got it," he yelled back, his heart racing. As he threw the tarp over the bales, he could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, a reminder of the times they had worked side by side as children. It was a fleeting moment, but it sparked a sense of unity that had long been buried. The storm hit with a ferocity that left them breathless. Rain pelted down like bullets, and the wind howled around them, but they pressed on, driven by a shared goal. As they fought against the elements, it became clear that they were in this together, united by the urgency to save what they could. "Keep going," Sam shouted, his voice barely audible over the storm. "We can't let it take everything." John nodded, his resolve solidifying as they pushed through the chaos. In that moment, surrounded by the fury of nature, the barriers that had stood between them for years began to crack, revealing the possibility of something more than just survival. The wind howled like a wounded animal as John and Sam fought against the elements, their bodies moving instinctively to secure the ranch from the oncoming storm. Rain began to pelt the ground, and the once calm landscape transformed into a chaotic battleground. "Grab that tarp," Sam shouted over the roar of the winds, pointing towards a flapping piece of plastic that threatened to tear away from the barn. John nodded, adrenaline surging through him as he sprinted towards it, the mud sucking at his boots with every step. As he reached the tarp, he felt a surge of frustration. "This is all your fault, you know," he yelled back at Sam, who was struggling to hold up a fence post against the gusts. "If you had asked for help sooner, we might not be in this mess." "Help? You left us," Sam retorted, his voice thick with resentment as he wrestled the post into place. "You chose your career over your family. Don't act like you care now." John's heart raced, not just from the exertion, but from the weight of Sam's words. He had spent years building a life apart from this, and yet here he was, caught in the storm, both literally and metaphorically. "I left because I was tired of the constant fighting. You never saw it from my side. You think I wanted this?" Sam shot back, frustration boiling over. "You think I wanted to stay here, struggling alone while you lived your perfect life in Houston? I needed you, and you just disappeared." The storm intensified, sending sheets of rain cascading down on them. John wrestled with the tarp, his hands numb from the cold, but Sam was right. He had left. And the guilt gnawed at him, sharper than any wind. He paused for a moment, taking a breath as the memories flooded back. Arguments with Sam, the disappointment in their father's eyes. "Just help me with this," Sam barked, snapping John back to reality. With a grunt of agreement, they pushed the tarp together, their shoulders brushing against each other, an unspoken acknowledgement of the shared burden they carried. As they secured it, a flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by an earth-shattering clap of thunder. The ground trembled beneath them. "We're going to lose everything if we don't work together," John shouted, his voice barely rising above the tempest. "Then let's do it," Sam yelled back, determination igniting in his eyes. "For once, let's put aside the past and just focus on saving what we have." They moved in tandem, their bodies synchronizing in a rhythm forged by necessity. For every insult that had once separated them, they now forged a connection through their shared struggle. With each task completed, the atmosphere lightened just a fraction, and the walls they had built around their hearts began to crack. "Remember that time we almost lost the barn to a storm like this?" Sam asked, a hint of nostalgia creeping into his voice as they worked. "We were just kids, but we managed to keep it standing. Just the two of us." John smiled faintly, wiping rain from his brow. "Yeah, and you almost knocked me out with that hammer. I thought Dad would kill you." Sam chuckled, a genuine laugh that was rare between them. Dad was more worried about the barn than me, as usual. In that moment, as they faced the storm together, John felt a flicker of warmth in the cold chaos surrounding them. It was a reminder of the bond they once had, a bond that had been suffocated by years of misunderstandings and hurt. The tempest raged on, but amidst the chaos, something shifted. They were no longer just brothers with a fractured history. They were allies in a fight for survival, united by the need to protect their family legacy. As the storm raged, they worked harder, pushing aside their grievances, realizing that every moment spent fighting together was a step toward healing the wounds of their past. Exhausted but resolute, they finally stepped back to assess their progress. The barn still stood, though battered, and as they looked at each other through the rain-soaked haze, they shared a fleeting moment of triumph. In that shared victory, a glimmer of hope emerged, a flicker of what could be, a family fighting for what mattered most. "Let's keep going," John said, a newfound determination in his voice. "We can make this work. Together." "Together," Sam echoed, the weight of years of resentment beginning to lift, even if just a little. They turned back to the tempest, ready to face whatever came next, not as estranged brothers, but as partners united by the storm. As storm clouds began to disperse, revealing a sky painted in hues of orange and purple, Henry stood at the edge of the porch, watching his sons as they collapsed onto the muddy ground. The remnants of the tempest lay scattered around them. Broken branches, debris, and the echoes of their heated words still hung thick in the air. He felt a surge of emotion as he observed the exhaustion on their faces. After years of silence, they were finally together again, not just as brothers, but as two wounded souls searching for healing. "Boys," Henry's voice broke through the stillness. It was shaky, a whisper carried by the gentle breeze. John and Sam looked up, their expressions a mixture of fatigue and trepidation. They had spent the day battling nature and each other, but now, in the aftermath, a different kind of battle loomed ahead. "I need to talk to you," Henry continued, his heart racing. This was a moment he had both dreaded and longed for. "I've made so many mistakes. I've been a terrible father." John narrowed his eyes, his defenses still high from the day's events. "What do you mean, Dad?" His tone was cautious, a hint of skepticism lacing his words. "I mean," Henry paused, collecting his thoughts as he looked out over the ravaged ranch. "I've always pushed you both too hard. I thought I was preparing you for the world, but all I did was drive you away." His gaze fell to the ground as the weight of his admissions pressed down on him. "I was afraid I wouldn't be enough for you." Sam shifted uncomfortably, the tension palpable in the air. "You were never there for us, Dad. You were always more concerned with the ranch than with us," he said, bitterness creeping back into his voice, but it was tinged with something softer, a yearning for understanding. Henry nodded, accepting his son's words. "I know, and I'm sorry for that. I thought if I could just make everything perfect here, you would be happy. but I see now that it only made you feel inadequate." He took a deep breath, his chest tightening with emotion. "I was wrong. I should have been there, present and supportive. Instead, I became the very thing I feared." John's expression softened slightly, his own pain surfacing as he listened to his father's confession. "You made us feel like we had to be perfect, Dad, like we were never good enough." Henry's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I see that now. I was so focused on my own fears and expectations that I failed to see you as you were. Wonderful, capable young men. I wanted to protect you from failure, but instead, I pushed you away. I'm sorry for that, truly." Silence enveloped them, the weight of Henry's words settling in. John felt a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. It's hard to hear this," he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I wanted you to be proud of me, but I always felt like I was just disappointing you." "I never wanted you to feel that way," Henry replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to shield you from the harshness of life, but in doing so I forgot to show you love. I was afraid of being vulnerable. I thought strength meant never showing weakness." Sam stepped closer, a tentative bridge forming between them. "We've all made mistakes, Dad, but it's not too late to change that," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "We're here now. We can rebuild together." "Yes," John added, a hint of hope flickering in his eyes. "We've all lost so much time, but maybe we can find a way back. It won't be easy, but I want to try." Henry's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. For the first time in years, he felt the possibility of reconnection. "I want that too, more than anything," he said, emotions flooding his voice. "I want to be the father you deserve. I want to be part of your lives, not just a memory of disappointment." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of hope, the three of them stood together, slowly bridging the chasm that had separated them for so long. The storm had passed, but its legacy lingered, a reminder of their struggles and the power of vulnerability. Together they took a tentative step toward healing, ready to face whatever came next, united by the shared understanding of their past and the promise of a better future. As storm clouds still loomed ominously in the sky when Emily arrived at the ranch, her cheerful demeanor contrasting sharply with the heavy atmosphere that enveloped the property. She stepped out of her truck, a basket of freshly baked goods swinging from her arm, and wiped the dirt from her brow. The familiar sight of the old house and the dilapidated barns tugged at her heartstrings. This was where she had spent countless weekends with John and Sam during their childhood, and seeing it in such disarray brought a sense of urgency to her mission. "Hey, boys," Emily called out, her voice cutting through the tense silence that hung in the air. John and Sam were standing amidst the wreckage of what used to be the barn, their faces etched with fatigue and frustration. They turned towards her, surprised but grateful for the distraction. "Emily," John said, a flicker of a smile breaking through his guarded expression. "What are you doing here?" "I brought some food," she replied, holding up the basket like a peace offering. "Thought you could use a little pick-me-up." Sam's expression softened as he stepped forward. "You have no idea how much we need it right now. Thanks for coming." As Emily approached, she could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the remnants of the storm still swirling in their minds. "I've heard about the storm. I can't believe how much damage it caused," she said, glancing around at the fallen fences and scattered debris. "It's a mess," John admitted, running a hand through his hair. "We're trying to salvage what we can, but it feels overwhelming." "Come on, let's take a break," Emily suggested, setting the basket down on a nearby crate. She began unpacking the contents, revealing warm muffins and cookies, the sweet aroma wafting through the air. "You boys need to eat. You can't tackle this place on empty stomachs." "Since when did you become the voice of reason?" John teased lightly, a hint of his old playful spirit returning as he took a muffin. "Since I realized someone had to be," Emily shot back with a grin, nudging Sam playfully. "Besides, I know how you both get when you're hungry. You turn into grumpy old men." Sam chuckled, the tension easing for a moment. "Guilty as charged. I'll take a muffin and try not to scowl at you." As they sat on the crate sharing the food, Emily watched them closely. She could sense the heaviness that lingered between the brothers, a silent battle of unresolved feelings. "You know," she began cautiously, I've been thinking about you two a lot lately. It's been tough seeing how much you've both changed and how much you've both been through. John looked at her, his expression serious. You have no idea, Em. It's like we're stuck in this cycle of blame and anger. I don't even know how to reach out to him anymore. He gestured towards Sam, who kept his gaze fixed on the ground. I'm right here, John, Sam replied quietly, the hurt in his voice undeniable. You're the one who left. You walked away from all of this. I had my reasons, John shot back, frustration creeping into his tone. You can't just keep holding that against me. Emily held up her hands, sensing the tension rising again. Okay. Let's not turn this into another argument. You both are here now, and that's what matters. You're brothers, and you've always had each other's backs, even when things got tough. Sam finally met John's gaze, his eyes revealing a mixture of longing and pain. I wish things could go back to how they used to be, before everything fell apart. Me too, John admitted, his voice softer. But we can't change the past. We can only try to fix what's broken now. And maybe start by talking instead of fighting. Emily smiled gently, feeling a flicker of hope. That's a good start. You both are stronger together than you realize. Just look at what you accomplished during the storm. You worked side by side, even when it was hard. I guess, Sam said hesitantly, but it felt like we were just fighting against the wind the whole time. Maybe it's time to fight for something together instead, Emily suggested, her eyes sparkling with determination. You both have so much potential to rebuild not just the ranch, but your relationship as well. You just need to let go of the past a little. John nodded thoughtfully, the weight of her words sinking in. You're right, Emily. I think I've been so focused on what went wrong that I forgot what really matters. As they sat there, surrounded by the remnants of the storm, a sense of camaraderie began to swell in the air. The lingering bitterness started to fade, replaced by the warmth of shared memories and the promise of rebuilding not just the ranch, but the bonds that had once made them inseparable. Emily's presence had reminded them of the strength they could find in each other. And for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the worn wooden table where John and Sam found themselves seated once more. The remnants of Emily's visit lingered in the air, a sense of hope interwoven with the fragrance of the homemade meal they had shared. The tension that had once suffocated their conversations seemed to have lifted, replaced by an unspoken understanding that perhaps they could find a way forward together. Maybe we should stop focusing on what's gone wrong and start thinking about what we can actually do to fix this place, Sam suggested, his voice steady yet laced with a newfound determination. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes brightening with the possibility. I mean, look at what we've already accomplished since you got here. The barn isn't going to fix itself. John nodded, his gaze drifting over the familiar surroundings that had once felt like a prison. You're right. We've spent too long blaming each other for the past. What if we put our heads together instead? He paused, glancing at Sam, who appeared thoughtful. I've been thinking about the structural issues. There are parts of the main barn that could use some serious reinforcement. Reinforcement? Sam echoed, raising an eyebrow. You mean like actually rebuilding some of it? I thought you'd want to come in here and design something flashy. He smirked, trying to lighten the mood. John chuckled lightly, appreciation flickering in his chest. I might be an engineer, but I know when to keep it simple. We need stability first. Flashiness can come later. We have to make sure the roof stays over our heads before we worry about aesthetics. Sam leaned back, crossing his arms, a smile creeping onto his face. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd say that. You've always been the one looking to build the next big thing. Yeah, well, I've learned a thing or two about what really matters, John replied, his tone softening. And I think we could really use a solid plan. What about your ideas for diversifying the crops? That could bring us some income and help us invest in repairs. Exactly, Sam exclaimed, excitement bubbling in his voice. I've been thinking we should try growing some organic produce. There's a market for it now, and it could set us apart. I could use my connections at the local farmers market to get us started. John's interest was piqued. Organic produce? Huh? That could work. It'll take some investment, but if we can get it off the ground, we might even attract some attention. We should look into getting a local grant or something. Now you're talking, Sam said, his confidence growing. If we present a solid plan, we might stand a chance. We could even draw in some volunteers to help with the planting. There are people in the community who would love to get involved. Volunteers could be a game changer, John mused, feeling a spark of excitement. The more hands we have, the more we can accomplish. But we need to make sure we're organized. This isn't just about the ranch, it's about rebuilding our relationship too. Right, Sam agreed, his expression shifting to one of seriousness. We can't just work side by side, we need to communicate. No more accusations, just honest conversations, like adults. John held Sam's gaze, their shared history weighing heavily between them, but now feeling lighter. I'm in. Let's make a commitment right here, right now. No more blaming, we work together, or we don't work at all. The sincerity in John's voice struck a chord in Sam. Deal, he said, extending his hand. Let's shake on it. They clasped hands firmly, the gesture carrying a weight of promise. It felt different this time. A reconciliation that echoed deeper than mere words. As they released their grip, an unfamiliar warmth filled the space between them, a sense of kinship that had long been dormant. All right, let's start drafting some plans, John said, a hint of excitement creeping back into his voice. We'll need to map out the barn repairs and figure out how much we can invest in the crops. Sam nodded, leaning forward again. I'll pull together what I can about potential grants and community support. We need to hit the ground running. With that, the brothers began to brainstorm together, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that felt almost natural. Ideas flowed, and for the first time in a long while, they weren't just brothers bound by blood. They were collaborators, united by a common goal. The ranch, once a symbol of their fractured past, began to transform into a canvas for their shared future. Over the next few days, John and Sam worked tirelessly together on the ranch, their hands covered in dirt and sweat. Each morning brought a renewed sense of purpose, and the once dilapidated structures began to show signs of life. The brothers collaborated seamlessly, their previous animosities slowly eroding with every nail hammered and every beam lifted. "Pass me that wrench, will you?" John called out, his voice cutting through the morning air. He crouched beneath the frame of the barn, where he was tightening bolts with the focus of a seasoned engineer. Sam, standing a few feet away, was balancing a stack of weathered wood on his shoulder. He paused, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Which one? The one with the rust or the shiny new one?" Sam replied, a hint of playfulness returning to his tone. It was a stark contrast from the tension that had defined their earlier encounters. "Let's go with the shiny one. It's probably less likely to snap in half when I really need it," John quipped, a smile emerging on his face. Sam chuckled, the sound lightening the heavy atmosphere that had hung over the ranch for so long. He tossed the wrench to John, who caught it with ease, his heart swelling with a sense of camaraderie that he hadn't felt in years. As the day wore on, their efforts transformed the ranch. The once crumbling fences were being rebuilt, and the gardens were being cleared of weeds. Every small victory fueled their spirits. They began to talk more, sharing stories and memories that had been buried under years of resentment. "Remember that summer when we tried to build that tree house?" Sam said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "We ended up with a glorified ladder instead." John laughed heartily, the sound echoing against the barn walls. "I remember you almost fell off it trying to impress that girl from down the road. What was her name? Lisa?" "Yeah, Lisa," Sam said, a nostalgic grin spreading across his face. "Man, I was so convinced that Treehouse would win her over." "Didn't work out, did it?" John teased, nudging Sam with his elbow. "Nope, but I think she liked the view from the ground better," Sam replied, rolling his eyes. The laughter helped bridge the gap that had divided them for so long, and as they worked side by side, they found themselves not just brothers, but friends again. Henry watched from a distance, leaning against the porch rail. His heart swelled with pride as he observed his sons. The sight of them working together, laughing and joking, was a balm to his worried soul. He had always feared their differences would keep them apart forever, but perhaps this was the turning point he had hoped for. "Boys," Henry called out, his voice shaky but filled with warmth. "You're doing an incredible job out there." "Thanks, Dad," John shouted back, glancing up with a smile that reflected the sunlight dancing off the wood. Sam waved, his face flushed with exertion and joy. As night fell, they gathered around the dinner table, a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables laid out before them. The atmosphere was lighter, filled with the kind of warmth that had been missing for years. Henry watched his sons as they exchanged stories, the tension that had once defined their interactions, now replaced by laughter and easy conversation. "Looks like you two are finally getting along," Henry remarked, a hint of relief in his voice. "I can't remember the last time I saw you both smile so much." John glanced at Sam, who was nodding in agreement. "It feels good to work together," John admitted. "I guess we've been so busy holding on to the past that we forgot how to be a family." Sam chimed in. "Yeah, I think we're finally starting to see each other again, instead of just the hurt." Henry nodded, his heart swelling with hope. "I've made mistakes too. I should have encouraged you both more instead of pushing you harder. I'm proud of you both. You're doing something amazing here." The sincerity in Henry's voice struck a chord with John. "It means a lot to hear you say that, Dad," he replied, his tone softer than it had been in a long time. "I know we can't change the past, but maybe we can build something better now." As they finished their meal, Henry's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude. The barriers that had once divided them were slowly crumbling, replaced by a shared vision for the future. The brothers exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They were on the path to healing, and for the first time in years, hope flickered brightly in their hearts. As John rummaged through the dusty old barn, he felt a sense of nostalgia wash over him. The scent of aged wood and hay reminded him of his childhood, a time when he and Sam used to play hide-and-seek among the stacks of feed. It was during this trip down memory lane that he stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal tucked away in the corner. The cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with time. Curiosity piqued, he carefully opened it, revealing his father Henry's neat handwriting. "Hey Sam, come look at this," John called out, excitement tinging his voice. Sam was at the other end of the barn, hammering nails into a piece of wood for a repair project. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow, and ambled over. "What did you find?" he asked, his interest piqued. John held the diary open, revealing sketches and notes from years gone by. "It's Dad's journal. Look at these drawings. He sketched out plans for the ranch, dreams he had for us." His eyes scanned the pages, and he felt a knot form in his throat. He wanted this place to be a haven for us, a place where we could all work together. Sam leaned closer, squinting at the faded ink. "Did he really? I always thought he just wanted us to be perfect, to meet his expectations," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. John flipped through the pages, his fingers trembling slightly. "It looks like he had visions for us all. Fishing trips, family dinners, working side by side. There are notes about how he wanted to teach us about farming, about life. He dreamed of us being a team, Sam." A silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. "Why didn't he ever share any of this with us?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Instead, he just pushed us away." "Maybe he didn't know how," John replied, closing the diary and holding it close to his chest. "He was afraid of failing us, just like we've been afraid of him." Just then, Henry appeared at the entrance of the barn, leaning against the wooden frame. His frail figure was wrapped in a worn flannel shirt, and his eyes glimmered with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What are you two doing in here?" he asked, his voice raspy yet warm. "Dad, we found your journal," John said, motioning for Henry to come closer. "You wrote about your dreams for the ranch. For us, we didn't know." Henry's expression shifted from curiosity to vulnerability. "You found it, huh?" He took a step forward, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I didn't think anyone would ever look at that old thing. You wrote about wanting us to work together, to be a family," Sam said, a hint of accusation in his tone. "But it felt like you only wanted us to be perfect." Henry sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his regrets. "I was hard on you both. I thought if I pushed you, you'd become better men. I never meant to drive you away." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "I was just scared. I was scared of not being enough, of failing you. John felt a wave of empathy crash over him. Dad, we all made mistakes. I thought you didn't care, but now I see that you cared too much in a way. You were just trying to protect us. Henry nodded slowly. I wanted you to have everything I didn't. I just didn't know how to express it. I see that now. I'm sorry for not being the father you needed, he admitted, his voice trembling. Sam stepped forward, his voice breaking. We've all hurt each other, Dad. But I think we can start over. I want to understand you better. John glanced at Sam, then back at Henry. We can rebuild this ranch together. Not just the buildings, but our relationship. Let's put the past behind us and work toward that dream you had. Henry's face lit up with a mixture of hope and gratitude. You don't know how much that means to me. I've wanted this for so long, he said, emotion thick in his voice. The three of them stood in the dim light of the barn, the air heavy with promise. As John placed the journal down on a nearby table, a sense of unity enveloped them. Let's make those dreams come true, John said, determination igniting within him. With that, they shared an emotional embrace, the warmth of their connection melting away years of resentment and pain. They stood together against the backdrop of the barn, the distant horizon hinting at a new dawn. The promise of healing and reconciliation filled their hearts as they looked forward to a future where they would not only restore the ranch, but also the bonds of family that had long been frayed. Together, we can do this, Sam said, a smile breaking through the tension. And as they stepped outside, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the path ahead. A path filled with hope, forgiveness, and the unwavering strength of family. Curious to know how Jenna found out Caleb was her long-lost twin brother, and the devastating secret that almost tore them apart? Don't miss the next video. Click now on the video popping up on your screen and uncover all the details of their emotional journey of healing and reunion. You won't want to miss it.